In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life.
Christ is
Risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. Thank you. So here we are, continuing on sort of with our study of Matthew, but it's really a study of the Old Testament because we're not out of the genealogy yet. And I want to keep going because, again, I think these things are both interesting and helpful. It really does give us a very clear picture of the relationship between God and his people, the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And it also shows just how much we need God. It is a horrible continuation of the very fact that we really do, well, you'll see. All right, so the first person we're going to talk about, we're going to finish up with David, but we're going to really talk about Solomon. So David, as we talked about last week, was seen as a very mighty king at the beginning. He killed Goliath, right? Not last week, week before. He really became wildly popular among the people. Remember, while Saul was still king, the people would sing, Saul kills his 1,000, but David kills his 10,000, right? And so Saul tried to kill David a number of times. David had actually many opportunities to kill Saul and did not. So all of that kind of thing happened. Then Saul did die, and David took over as king. And what happened to David? Well, he was good at the beginning, and then not so good. Now, one of the things that happened as a result of the number of people that David killed is that God did not allow him to build a temple because his hands were too bloody. Okay, so he was not allowed to build a temple to God. Now, something to understand about all this, until David's time, they were basically nomadic. Okay, even in Saul's time, they were pretty much moving from place to place to place. It would be dependent on agriculture. It would be dependent on water sources, and it would be dependent on how you're getting along with your neighbors. Well, by the time David comes around and is able to pretty much put down every opponent, that's why he's seen as such a great king, is that he really did handle everybody. So David is able to set up Jerusalem as the home base, if you will, of his people. That's why even to this day, Jerusalem is called the city of David. Okay, so Jerusalem becomes the central focus of the people of God, of the people of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And David sins, as we discussed, his little issue with Bathsheba, and his confrontation with Nathan the prophet. And Nathan condemns him and tells him that God is going to kill the child that came out as a result of the union between David and Bathsheba. And indeed, that does happen. And then they have another child, and that would be Solomon. David also had major problems. He had a lot of children. Okay, and we're not going to go into all the details there. But one child in particular, Absalom, was a very intelligent strategist in the military. And there was a time when he tried to usurp the throne. He tried to kill his father. And the one thing about Absalom is that he had very long hair. And so in one of the campaigns, when he was fleeing because David's troops had routed his troops, he gets caught in a thicket of trees. And one of the soldiers comes and kills him. And David, in turn, kills the person who kills his son. So it's all very, very bloody. And it doesn't stop being bloody. So what we're going to do, so David rules for 40 years. And then he dies. And in his place, well, one son thought that he was going to get the throne, and he didn't, because he didn't have favor with God. He didn't have favor with Nathan the prophet or Zadok the priest. And so he himself has to go into exile, and then he messes up and gets killed too. So who takes over is Solomon. Okay, now Solomon is he starts out with a pretty bloody purge. He pretty much eliminates every opponent in his way, and including this other brother. He promises originally that the brother will have safe conduct, and then the brother does something kind of nasty, and so he changes his mind and kills him. I think right at the temple. I'm not sure. There are a lot of people who die right at the temple, so I'm not sure. But remember, the temple at this point is not the big building of the temple that Jesus speaks of. Or actually, when Jesus is in Jerusalem at the time, that's the second temple. But there's a first temple, and that is actually built by Solomon. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Okay. So that's the background of all of this. Let's look at 1 Kings chapter 3. We're going to start with verse 3, and we're going to read to verse 28. And please read loudly.
Chapter what?
It's 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 3 through 28.
Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of David his father. Only he sacrificed and burnt incense at the high places. And the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the great high place. Solomon used to offer 1,000 burnt offerings upon that altar.
Okay, so wait just for 1 second. He loves the Lord, but he makes sacrifices to idols. That's basically what's being said there. Okay, when you say the high places, those aren't the places where the priests are. That's where he is. Okay, all right, go on.
At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, "Ask what I shall give you." And Solomon said, "Thou hast shown great and steadfast love to thy servant David, my father, because he walked before thee in faithfulness, in righteousness, and in uprightness of heart toward thee. And thou hast kept for him this great and steadfast love, and hast given him a son to sit on his throne this day. And now, O Lord my God, thou hast made thy servant king in place of David, my father. Although I am but a little child, I do not know how to go out or come in. And thy servant is in the midst of thy people, whom thou hast chosen, a great people that cannot be numbered or counted for multitude. Give thy servant therefore an understanding mind to govern thy people, that I may discern between good and evil, for who is able to govern this great people?" It pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this. And God said to him, "Because you have asked this, and have not asked for yourself long life or riches for the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern what is right, behold, I now do according to your word. Behold, I give you a wise and discerning mind, so that none like you has been before you, and none like you shall arise after you. I give you also what you have not asked, both riches and honor, so that no other king shall compare with you all your days. And if you will walk in my ways, keeping my statutes and my commandments, as your father David walked, then I will lengthen your days." And Solomon awoke, and behold, it was a dream. Then he came to Jerusalem, and stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and offered up burnt offerings and peace offerings, and made a feast for all his servants. Then 2 harlots came to the king and stood before him. The one woman said, "O my lord, this woman and I dwelt in the same house, and I gave birth to a child while she was in the house. Then on the 3rd day after I was delivered, this woman also gave birth, and we were alone. There was no one else with us in the house, only we 2 were in the house. And this woman's son died in the night because she lay on it. And she arose at midnight and took my son from beside me, while your maidservant slept, and laid it in her bosom, and laid her dead son in my bosom. When I arose in the morning to nurse my child, behold, it was dead. But when I looked at it closely in the morning, behold, it was not the child that I had borne." But the other woman said, "No, the living child is mine, and the dead child is yours." The first said, "No, the dead child is yours, and the living child is mine." Thus they spoke before the king. Then the king said, "The one says, 'This is my son that is alive, and your son is dead.' And the other says, 'No, but your son is dead, and my son is the living one.' And the king said, 'Bring me a sword.' So a sword was brought before the king, and the king said, "Divide the living child in two, and give half to the one and half to the other." Then the woman whose son was alive, said to the king, because her heart yearned for her son, "O my lord, give her the living child, and by no means slay it." But the other said, "It shall be neither mine nor yours, divide it." Then the king answered and said, "Give the living child to the first woman, and by no means slay it. She is its mother." And all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had rendered, and they stood in awe of the king, because they perceived that the wisdom of God was in him to render justice.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great story, isn't it? So Solomon shows his wisdom by doing this. And what a great passage that is before when God says, "I'll give you whatever you want." And he says, "Give me the wisdom to rule your people." And that, again, shows the deep humility of Solomon and how much he just desired not the riches of being a king, not the power that comes with being a king, but the wisdom to be able to take care of the people that God gave him, which is a truly beautiful thing. The word Solomon actually comes from shalom, so it's another derivative of the word peace. And in many ways, Solomon is the antithesis of David. David earned his kingdom through might of war. Solomon maintains his kingdom through wisdom and discernment. So that's how we get, really, if you look at this is Israel at its best. People yearn for David, but David had to fight and claw and scratch pretty much his entire time as a king. Now, Solomon certainly didn't have to shy away from war. He still faced a lot of adversity, but it was never to the length of that. And in the meantime, he was able to do what? Well, let's take a look at that. 1 Kings 6, verses 1 through 6.
In the 480th year after the people of Israel came out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, which is the 2nd month, he began to build the house of the Lord. The house which King Solomon built for the Lord was 60 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. The vestibule in front of the nave of the house was 20 cubits long, equal to the width of the house, and 10 cubits deep in the front of the house. And he made for the house windows with recessed frames. He also built a structure against the wall of the house, running round the walls of the house, both the nave and the inner sanctuary. And he made side chambers all around. The lowest story was 5 cubits broad, the middle one was 6 cubits broad, and the third was 7 cubits broad. For around the outside of the house he made offsets on the wall in order that the supporting beams should not be inserted into the walls of the house. When the house was built, it was with stone prepared at the quarry, so that neither hammer nor axe nor any tool of iron was heard in the temple while it was being built. The entrance for the lowest story was on the south side of the house, and one went up by stairs to the middle story, and from the middle story to the third. So he built the house and finished it, and he made the seating of the house of beams and planks of cedar. He built the structure against the whole house, each story 5 cubits high, and it was joined to the house with timbers of cedar. Now the word of the Lord came to Solomon, concerning this house which you are building, if you walk in my statutes and obey my ordinances, and keep all my commandments and walk in them, then I will establish my word with you, which I spoke to David your father. And I will dwell among the children of Israel, and will not forsake my people Israel. So Solomon built the house and finished it. He lined the walls of the house on the inside with boards of cedar, from the floor of the house to the rafters of the ceiling. He covered them on the inside with wood, and he covered the floor of the house with boards of cypress. He built 20 cubits of the rear of the house with boards of cedar from the floor to the rafters, and he built this within as an inner sanctuary, as the most holy place. The house, that is, the nave in front of the inner sanctuary, was 40 cubits long. The cedar within the house was carved in the form of gourds and open flowers, All was cedar, no stone was seen. The inner sanctuary he prepared in the innermost part of the house to set there the ark of the covenant of the Lord. The inner sanctuary was 20 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 20 cubits high, and he overlaid it with pure gold. He also made an altar of cedar, and Solomon overlaid the inside of the house with pure gold, and he drew chains of gold across in front of the inner sanctuary and overlaid it with gold. And he overlaid the whole house with gold until all the house was finished. Also the whole altar that belonged to the inner sanctuary he overlaid with gold. In the inner sanctuary he made 2 cherubim of olive wood, each 10 cubits high. 5 cubits was the length of one wing of the cherub, and 5 cubits the length of the other wing of the cherub. It was 10 cubits from the tip of one wing to the tip of the other. The other cherub also measured 10 cubits. Both cherubim had the same measure and the same form. The height of one cherub was 10 cubits, so was that of the other cherub. He put the cherubim in the innermost part of the house, and the wings of the cherubim were spread out so that a wing of one touched the one wall, and the wing of the other cherub touched the other wall. Their other wings touched each other in the middle of the house, and he overlaid the cherubim with gold. He carved all the walls of the house round about with carved figures of cherubim and palm trees and open flowers in the inner and outer rooms. The floor of the house he overlaid with gold in the inner and outer rooms. For the entrance to the inner sanctuary, he made doors of olive wood. The lintel and the doorpost formed a pentagon. He covered the 2 doors of olive wood with carvings of cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers. He overlaid them with gold and spread gold upon the cherubim and upon the palm leaves. So also he made for the entrance to the nave doorposts of olive wood in the form of a square, and 2 doors of cypress wood, and 2 leaves of the one door were folding, and the 2 leaves of the other door were folding. On them he carved cherubim and palm trees and open flowers, and he overlaid them with gold, evenly applied upon the carved wood work. He built the inner court with 3 courses of hewn stone and 1 course of cedar beams. In the 4th year, the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid in the month of Ziv, and in the 11th year, in the month of Bul, which is the 8th month, the house was finished in all its parts, and according to all its specifications. He was 7 years in building it.
That's probably enough. Thank you. So, wow. I mean, how beautiful, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's stunning. It's obviously a place worthy for God. There's all the best can buy. And that is part of the problem. We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Was it actual gold?
Yes. That's the understanding. Now, remember, this is written before the exile. So the first thing that happens, the exile, is that the temple is destroyed because there's a lot of gold there. So they take the gold. Okay. I don't know what the second temple looks like. I didn't get that far. But the first temple certainly was opulent and gorgeous. And that's part of the problem. Now, a couple of things to point out. This sounds a lot like our own church. Okay, as it should, because our church is based after the temple. The second is you're getting a lot of biblical architecture here, which is kind of cool. But the third is it took him 7 years to build. 7 years to build all of this. And what a cool thing that everything was prepared remotely and then it was brought in. So they knew exactly what they needed and they just put it right in. They didn't need to hew it in any way, shape, or form. They didn't need stone cutters. They didn't need carpenters. All they did is laid everything in place as it was supposed to be. And Solomon was overseeing all of that, which is pretty cool. So again, they're no longer nomadic. This is the place where they're going to go and they're going to make their sacrifices. Okay, so whenever you hear the talk about bulls that are sacrificed on altars and all those other things, this is where that's happening. Okay, and it's a very messy business. You know, inside there's a holy of holies that is completely set aside. Okay, no one goes in there but once a year, and only then the chief priest, and that's to offer prayers and sacrifices for the errors of the people. So he goes on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, and he makes that sacrifice. He goes in with a rope tied on him. If he dies because God is displeased with him or his people, then he's going to die. And they use the rope to pull him out. Okay. But for the most part, what you have is the sanctuary itself. So there's the Holy of Holies, and then there's the Holy. Okay. That's where the altar is. Okay. And the altar is where those sacrifices are made of thanksgiving, of sin, reparation, of total consumption, all of those things. Okay. All right. So, yeah, so 7 years. 7 years is what it takes to build this. All right. Someone want to look at first. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Fine.
How old is Solomon here?
Well,
know?
he's not that old, okay, because he also reigns for 40 years and he's young as a starter. Okay. So David rules for 40 years, Solomon rules for 40 years.
And he built this temple soon after he.
Yes, because David was tasked with doing it. It was his dream to do it, but his hands were too bloody. And so Solomon's most important thing to do is to build the temple. Yep.
I thought it was bigger than that.
What's that, the
I forgot
temple?
what a cubit was.
Well, I believe the second temple is bigger than the first.
Yeah, a cubit's a foot and a half.
Okay. Yeah, the second
I
temple
forgot
is
what it was.
considerably larger than the first. Pretty sure. Because I mean, when you're in Jerusalem, you can really get a sense of
30
the
cubits,
immensity of it.
45 feet. I mean, it's just
Not big.
that big.
Mm-mm. No, but Jerusalem is small,
Yeah, I understand that.
you know?
But I mean, it takes 7 years.
Well, let's go on. This is for your priest's amusement. Go to 1 Kings 7, 1 through 5.
All right, George.
1 Kings 7, 1 through 5.
Solomon was building his own house 13 years, and he finished his entire house. He built the house of the forest of Lebanon. Its length was 100 cubits, and its breadth 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. And it was built upon 3 rows of cedar pillars, with cedar beams upon the pillars. And it was covered with cedar above the chambers that were upon the 45 pillars, 15 in each row. There were window frames in 3 rows, and windows opposite windows in 3 tiers. All the doorways and windows had square frames, and window was opposite window in 3 tiers. And he made the hall of pillars. Its length was 50 cubits, and its breadth 30 cubits. There was a porch in front with pillars, and a canopy before them.
We can probably stop there. All I wanted you to get is a sense of the immensity of that, considerably larger than the temple. First of all. Second of all, it took him 13 years to build it. All right. And he spared no expense in building this either. Okay. So not only did he build the temple that was loaded with not just gold, but the best that they had to get. And, well, we'll talk about that in a second. But the same with his palace. Okay, so he builds a little house for God. He builds a big house for himself. It takes almost twice as long to build his palace. And basically what it ends up doing is bankrupting the country. So how that works, though, is he starts making these treaties with foreign agents. He meets up, the first woman that he meets is an Egyptian woman, falls in love with her, Pharaoh's daughter. Okay, so they develop and have a relationship of convenience. He meets the Queen of Sheba. It goes on and on and on. We'll see that in a second. But he does this in part to work out negotiations. He wants cedars from Lebanon. Well, I mean, that's not in Jerusalem, is it? That's not near Jerusalem. But he still wants those cedars. So he's going to make a deal with the people that are living in that area to get the cedar. He's going to make deals with people who have the gold, because that's not all from Israel. That's from other places. Okay, so he makes these deals. All right, and that gets him in trouble. All right, so let's look at 1 Kings 11, 1 through 8.
Now King Solomon loved many foreign women, the daughter of Pharaoh, and Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidonian and Hittite women from the nations, concerning which the Lord had said to the people of Israel, you shall not enter into marriage with them, neither shall they with you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their God.
Okay, stop for 1 second. All right. We'll keep going in a second, but remember our discussions in the past about how God tells his armies to go into these communities and kill them all. Kill them all. Men, women, and children.
And
Kill them all. And we think it's terrible because of, the humanity of it all, right? But that's why, okay? I've been saying this for years and years and years, but now there is right to your seeing. What is going on is that as people of God, you live a certain way, okay? Differently than the people around you. And so if you start marrying into other clans and other tribes, in all likelihood, you'll stop following after God and you'll start worshiping the idols that are a part of that community. A man falls in love with a woman of a town that was overrun. And he brings her home and he says, come on, let's go make an offering to our God. And she goes, well, why? I'm not doing that. And she doesn't. And then he says, well, if you're not doing it, I'm not doing it either. Okay. And so they both fall away. Right now, let's be really gentle with that, but look at our own lives. Okay. Kids marry other people and all of a sudden they stop being Orthodox. Now, I'm not saying we should kill the other kids, but that's the danger of mixed marriages. It's not a criticism at this point, but it's a valid comment.
Yes.
Okay. It's a valid comment. That's all. You can take it for what it's worth. But that's why God insists that they had killed everybody. And so now Solomon is under the same thing directly. God says to him, do not enter into a relationship with these people. And well, he does. There's a number in there. Keep reading until you get to the numbers. You're in 7:1-5. No, you're not. You're in 11:1-8. Sorry.
So where did I?
verse 3.
Verse 3. Oh, he had
Say it. Come on. Come on.
He had 700 wives,
700 wives,
princesses, and
princesses,
300 concubines.
300 concubines.
And his wives turned away his heart. Man, must have been one heck of a man.
What? I got nothing.
For when Solomon was old, his wives turned away his heart after other gods.
Yep.
And his heart was not wholly true to the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. For Solomon went after Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. So Solomon did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and did not wholly follow the Lord, as David his father had done.
That's probably enough. Okay.
He married them?
700 wives.
Well, the concubines he did.
He didn't marry the concubines. He only had 300 of them. Yeah.
Goodness.
Okay.
That is true.
Yeah, well,
That happens.
Didn't happen to me.
not in America. So let's look at chapter 11, verses 41-43, and let's just put Solomon to rest. So we're looking at 1 Kings 11, 41-43.
Now the rest of the acts of Solomon on all that he did in his wisdom, are they not written in the book of the acts of Solomon? And the time that Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel was 40 years. And Solomon slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David his father. And Rehoboam his son reigned in his stead.
Thank you. Very good. Okay, so that's the end of Solomon. Wow. So that's a lot, isn't it? So he goes from being this wise king who guards and shepherds his people, to building these really expensive and opulent temples and palaces, to falling in love with 700 plus, well, let's say 1,000 women plus princesses. And so he begins to live the life of a king, doesn't he? I mean, like a true king. Now, let's just stop right there for a second and let's go back. What does God say to the people of Israel when they say, we want a king? You already have one. It's me. What do you want? No, we want an earthly king. Well, it's not going to go how you think it will. That's what he says. It's not going to go how you think it will. So you get Saul. He's okay to start. He gets lousy. You have David. He's okay to start. He gets lousy. And then he sort of improves, but he doesn't ever really improve. And then you have Solomon, who starts out okay, and then he goes lousy. Okay, it's always that, because the stuff of the world becomes more important than the things that matter to God. That's just how it works. All right.
So nothing has changed.
No, and it never will.
Even in our day.
Well, I mean, yeah, but we don't, never mind. Yeah, you don't need to hear my stuff about that. So next is Rehoboam. Okay, and Rehoboam is Solomon's son. To give a little bit of background, I don't know, I have all these scriptures written down, but I forgot to take the notes about them. But the next thing that comes along, though, is because everything is so, well, let's just go ahead and read. Let's look at 1 Kings 12, verses 1 through 20. Listen to this. Horrible.
Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had come to Shechem to make him king. And when Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, heard of it, for he was still in Egypt, whither he had fled from King Solomon, then Jeroboam returned from Egypt, and they sent and called him, and Jeroboam and all the assembly of Israel came and said to Rehoboam, your father made our yoke heavy. Now therefore lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke upon us, and we will serve you. He said to them, depart for 3 days, then come again to me. So the people went away. Then King Rehoboam took counsel with the old men who had stood before Solomon his father while he was yet alive, saying, how do you advise me to answer this people? And they said to him, if you will be a servant to this people today and serve them, and speak good words to them when you answer them, then they will be your servants forever. But he forsook the counsel which the old men gave him, and took counsel with the young men who had grown up with him and stood before him. And he said to them, what do you advise that we answer this people who have said to me, lighten the yoke that your father put upon us? And the young men who had grown up with him said to him, thus shall you speak to this people who said to you, your father made our yoke heavy, but do you lighten it for us? Thus shall you say to them, my little finger is thicker than my father's loins. And now, whereas my father laid upon you a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. So Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam the 3rd day, as the king said, come to me again the 3rd day. And the king answered the people harshly, and forsaking the counsel which the old men had given him, he spoke to them according to the counsel of the young men, saying, my father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. So the king did not hearken to the people, for it was a turn of affairs brought about by the Lord, that he might fulfill his word, which the Lord spoke by Ahijah the Shilonite to Jeroboam the son of Nebat. And when all Israel saw that the king did not hearken to them, the people answered the king, what portion have we in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel, look now to your own house, David. So Israel departed to their tents, but Rehoboam reigned over the people of Israel who dwelt in the cities of Judah. Then King Rehoboam sent Adoram, who was taskmaster over the forced labor, and all Israel stoned him to death with stones. And King Rehoboam made haste to mount his chariot to flee to Jerusalem. So Israel had been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. And when all Israel heard that Jeroboam had returned, they sent and called him to the assembly and made him king over all Israel. There was none that followed the house of David, but the tribe of Judah only. When Rehoboam came to Jerusalem, he assembled all the house of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin, 180,000 chosen warriors.
Yeah, you can stop there. Okay, so what happens? Well, he's given wise counsel, ease up, take care of these people. And then he's given counsel from his buddies, his cronies, who say, oh no, make it worse for them. And that's what he does. And how do they choose to respond? They say, go away. They threaten his life. They take out his taskmaster and he has to flee to Jerusalem. The kingdoms split. Okay, so immediately after the rule of Solomon, you have the splitting of the two kingdoms, Judah and Israel. Okay, that's also known in Jesus's time as Samaria, as in Samaritans in the north, and Judea in the south. Okay, so there are two tribes of the nation that stay together. I believe the one is Benjamin and the other for sure is Judah. And the rest of the 10 tribes, remember there are 12 tribes of the children of Jesse, right? Not Jesse. Yeah. The one who rests is, well, they name him Israel, but Jacob, the 12 tribes of Jacob. Okay, so they're named after his 12 sons. Each gets a portion of land. But at this point, you have 10 that is split from the city of David. Okay, think about that. Now, throughout the ages, they remain separate. And in fact, as you read the rest of Kings and go into Chronicles, which basically tells the story over from a slightly different perspective, they're always comparing one with the other. In the year of King so-and-so of Israel, this person in Judah became king. In the year so-and-so of this king of Judah, this person became the king of Israel. They're keeping tabs one with the other. It's kind of hard to keep track. In fact, there's one time, one of the names here comes later. One of those names is actually the same. There are two kings of the same name, and each one rules part of the different kingdom. Okay. Now, why are we doing this? Again, we're doing this because I want you to see just what lineage our Lord comes from. Okay. An immersion like this gives us a pretty decent understanding of who it is that we're dealing with in terms of the people that he has come to be a part of. Okay. It's how do I put this? You know, when we think about the American Kennel Club, right? We just had the Westminster dog show the other day, right? And they're always worried about the purity of the bloodline. Okay. And even, you know, God help us, people like Adolf Hitler talk about the purity of the bloodline. Okay. Well, take a look at the purity of this bloodline. All right. It's human. Okay. I'm not saying it's scum. I'm not saying that they're garbage dwellers. They're royalty, but they all are human and they all sin. Every single one of them is a sinner, just like us. Okay. And that's important for us, I think, to understand that David himself was a sinner. Solomon was a sinner. Rehoboam was a sinner, and so on and so on and so on. Okay. So we're going to continue on with the story. It gets kind of, we pick up the pace a little bit from here on.
Kind of flies in the face of what some people try to debunk. If I was the writer of this, I would make them all clean and pure.
Right.
Right. If I wanted to falsify records,
right,
I'd want Jesus's lineage to be pure.
Right.
And so, you know, it sort of flies in the face of those that refute his lineage.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
It just doesn't make sense to do that.
Right.
To show how, I mean, they were blemished, just
right.
Maybe more so than some of us.
Yep. Yep. Okay, so good. That's exactly the point, that they are human, just like we are. Okay, so let's We just read 1 through 20. Let's look at Kings, 1 Kings 14, 21, and 22.
21 and 22. Now Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, reigned in Judah. And Rehoboam was 41 years old when he began to reign. And he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city which the Lord had chosen out of all the tribes of Israel to put his name there. His mother's name was Naamah the Ammonitess. And Judah did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. And they provoked him to jealousy with their sins, which they committed more than all that their fathers had done.
Oh boy. Shame on them. So Judah is falling away. Okay. Think about even what we do. I mean, not necessarily us, but when we depend on things other than God for our well-being, our salvation, our stability, we're doing the same things. That's a message that is saturated in Kings.
Why does it say they provoked him?
God?
No, no.
Read again.
And Judah did what was evil in the sight of the Lord.
Right.
And they provoked him to jealousy with their sins, which they committed.
Yes, they provoked God to jealousy. Jealousy is an awkward word, but basically their sin is idolatry. Okay? Their sin is idolatry, and he is a jealous God. He makes it very clear that he is a jealous God. Okay? So he's going to visit his wrath on them because they are worshiping someone other than him. It does not go well when you worship something other than God. All right, let's keep going. 14, 30, and 31, please.
And there was war between Rehoboam and Jeroboam continually. And Rehoboam slept with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in the city of David. His mother's name was Naamah the Ammonitess. And Abijam, his son, reigned in his stead.
Okay, so this is another one of those patterns that you have in Kings now. So it's going to say that he slept with his fathers. It's going to mention the name of his mother, and it's going to mention his successor. Okay, now Rehoboam and Jehoboam were enemies. One was the king of Israel. Jehoboam was the king of Israel. Rehoboam was the king of Judah. Okay, and so they constantly fought one with the other because they were looking and considered a civil war at this point. Okay, brother against brother, tribe against tribe, one trying to assert their dominance over the other and neither being able to succeed. Okay.
Our alarm for tomorrow at 9 a.m. will go off in 13 hours.
Alarm for 9 a.m.
You've been warned. All right, so Abijah is the next one along the line. Let's look at 1 Kings 15, chapter 15, verses 1 through 8. It's first.
Now,
go ahead.
Now in the 18th year of King Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, Abijam began to reign over Judea. He reigned for 3 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Micah, the daughter of Abisham, and he walked in all the sins which his father did before him, and his heart was not wholly true to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father. Nonetheless, for David's sake, the Lord his God gave him a lamp in Jerusalem, setting up his son after him and establishing Jerusalem.
Okay, that's probably enough. So I like how it's described. Okay, so he came and he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. Okay, and then it just lists all the other things that he did or didn't do, and how there was that even though he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, God still preserved Judah. Okay, he doesn't destroy it. Okay, so just to wrap that up, there is a continuing war between, well, we have Rehoboam already mentioned there. Let me look one more time. 15. No, okay. So there's a continuing war between the people of Israel and the people of Judah. And then he mentions who's going to succeed him, and that is Asa. I knew an Asa, actually. Yeah.
Lisa?
Now, Asa.
That's Lisa, my niece
Oops.
Lisa's stepson. His first name is Asa. Asa? ASA.
All right. So let's look at Asa. Asa is found in 1 Kings chapter 15, verses 9 through 24.
In the 20th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, Asa began to reign over Judah, and he reigned 41 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Abishalom. And Asa did what was right in the eyes of the Lord,
Aha.
as David his father had done. He put away the male called prostitutes out of the land and removed all the idols that his fathers had made. He also removed Maacah, his mother, from being queen mother because she had an abominable image made for Asherah. And Asa cut down her image and burned it at the brook Kidron. But the high places were not taken away. Nevertheless, the heart of Asa was wholly true to the Lord all his days. And he brought into the house of the Lord the votive gifts of his father and his own votive gifts, silver and gold and vessels. And there was war between Asa and Baasha, the king of Israel, all their days. Baasha, king of Israel, went up against Judah and built Ramah, that he might permit no one to go out or come in to Asa, king of Judah. Then Asa took all the silver and the gold that were left in the treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the king's house, and gave them into the hands of his servants. And King Asa sent them to Ben-Hadad, the son of Tabrimon, and son of Hezion, king of Syria, who dwelt in Damascus, saying, "Let there be a league between me and you, as between my father and your father. Behold, I am sending to you a present of silver and gold. Go break your league with Baasha, king of Israel, that he may withdraw from me." And Ben-Hadad hearkened to King Asa, and sent the commanders of his armies against the cities of Israel, and conquered Ijon, Dan, Abel Beth Maacah, and all Chinneroth, and all the land of Naphtali. And when Baasha heard of it, he stopped building Ramah, and he dwelt in Tisra. Then King Asa made a proclamation to all Judah, none was exempt, and they carried away the stones of Ramah and its timber, with which Baasha had been building. And with them King Asa built Geba of Benjamin and Mizpah. Now the rest of all the acts of Asa, all his might and all that he did, and the cities which he built, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? But in his old age he was deceased in his feet. And Asa slept with his fathers, and was buried with his fathers in the city of David his father. And Jehoshaphat his son reigned in his stead.
Thank you. So he did what was right in the sight of God. And he also bribed Syria so that they'd break their allegiance with Israel and instead would ally with Judah. And then when that worked, then they had to flee. And he basically took what was happening is Israel was trying to blockade Jerusalem. And so they went and they bribed a local foreign power. And then that foreign power came in and bolstered the troops of Judah. The people fled. The blockade was broken. They took what was being used to make the blockade and used it to build other things. And as far as the cult of the male prostitutes, again, it's an idolatrous thing. It's a it's just one of those weirder cults that are in existence at that time. You had people worshiping Beelzebub, you had people worshiping Baal, you had these male prostitutes, you had all these other cultic religions. Okay, so that's what Asa did. Now Asa dies, and then Jehoshaphat becomes the king after him. And every time I hear that, I think of Bugs Bunny. Because whenever, I think it's Yosemite Sam, whenever he gets upset, he goes, jumping Jehoshaphat, right? I always think of that. So yes, thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Warner Brothers. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about Jehoshaphat. It's probably the last thing we're going to do today, but take a look at him. That's First Kings. Whoops. Look at me. So it's 22 through 50, but I don't have the chapter.
Yeah, he's not mentioned anywhere in these 2 pages.
Yeah, it's because we are dealing a lot with, you know what we're going on to? All of a sudden, we're dealing with Elias. In the middle of all of this discussion about what's happening, all of a sudden, there's a break in the drama here between Judah and Israel, and you get the arrival of Elias the Tishbite. And so the majority of the chapters after this are dealing with his encounters with the prophets of Baal, right in the middle of this telling of what's going on in all these different areas. So let's see.
Yeah, Elijah and Ahab the Arab.
That's right.
Remember Ahab?
18, chapter 18.
Yeah, we're going to keep moving, though. We're not going to study Elias this time around because he's not part of the lineage of our Lord. So just bear with me. 19, probably not.
Ahab the Arab, king of the burning sands.
Burning sands.
22. I bet it's Kings 22. 21. Yep. 22. Yep, there we are. Okay. Let's go with chapter 22, verses 1 through, that's a lot, 1 through 50. We're going to read the whole chapter.
What is it?
Chapter 22 of Kings. That's a lot to read.
Yeah, it's too much.
It's too much. So let's slow down a little bit. Okay, so the executive summary of chapter 22. I'll just read for a little bit and then we'll stop. For 3 years, Syria and Israel continued without war. Israel. But in the 3rd year, Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, came down to the king of Israel. And the king of Israel said to his servants, "Do you know that Ramoth Gilead belongs to us, and we keep quiet and do not take it out of the hand of the king of Syria?" And he said to Jehoshaphat, "Will you go with me to battle at Ramoth Gilead?" And Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, "I am as you are, my people as your people, my horses as your horses." And Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, "Inquire first for the word of the Lord." Then the king of Israel gathered the prophets together, about 400 men, and said to them, "Shall I go to battle against Ramoth Gilead, or shall I forbear?" And they said, "Go up, for the Lord will give it into the hand of the king." But Jehoshaphat said, "Is there not here another prophet of the Lord of whom we may inquire?" And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, "There is yet one man by whom we may inquire, Micaiah, the son of Imlah, but I hate him, for he never prophesies good concerning me, but evil." And Jehoshaphat said, "Let not the king say so." Then the king of Israel summoned an officer and said, "Bring quickly Micaiah, the son of Imlah." Now the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, were sitting on their thrones, arrayed in their robes, at the threshing floor at the entrance of the gates of Samaria. And all the prophets were prophesying before them. And Zedekiah, the son of Chenaanah, made himself horns of iron and said, "Thus says the Lord, With these you shall push the Syrians until they are all destroyed. And all the prophets prophesied, saying, go up to Ramoth Gilead and triumph, and the Lord will give it into the hand of the king. Okay, so continuing on, Micaiah basically says, shall we go? And he says, go up in triumph, and the Lord will give it into the hand of the king. But the king said to him, how many times shall I adjure you to speak to me nothing of the truth in the name of the Lord? He said, I saw all Israel scattered upon the mountains as sheep that have no shepherd. And the Lord said, these have no master, let each return to his home in peace, which means that he's going to die. And Micaiah said, therefore the word of the Lord, I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing beside him, and his right hand is on his left. And the Lord said, who will entice Ahab, that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one said one thing, and another said another. Then a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord, saying, I will entice him. And the Lord said to him, by what means? And he said, I will go forth and be a living spirit in the mouth of all of his prophets. And he said, you are to entice him, and you shall succeed. Go forth now and do so. So what we see is that Micaiah is saying that the prophets have been basically fooled. So they seize Micaiah, and Micaiah then gives a bit of a curse. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, goes up to Ramoth Gilead. And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, I shall disguise myself and go into battle, but you wear your robes. And the king of Israel disguised himself and went into battle. Now the king of Syria had commanded 32 captains of his chariots, fight with neither small nor great, but only with the king of Israel. And when the captains saw Jehoshaphat, they said, surely it's the king of Israel. So they turned to fight against him, and Jehoshaphat cried out. And when the captains of the chariots saw that it was not the king of Israel, they turned back from him. But a certain man drew his bow at a venture and struck the king of Israel between the scale armor and the breastplate. And therefore he said to the driver of his chariot, turn about and carry me out of battle, for I am wounded. And the battle grew hot that day, and the king was propped up in his chariot facing the Syrians until at evening he died. And the blood of the wound flowed into the bottom of the chariot. And the sun set, a cry went out from the army that said, every man to his city, every man to his country. And so the king died and was brought to Samaria, and they buried him. They buried the king of Samaria. And they washed the chariot by the pool of Samaria. And the dogs licked up his blood, and harlots washed themselves in it, according to the word of the Lord which had been spoken. Now the rest of the acts of Ahab, and all that he did, the ivory house which he built, and all the cities that he built, are they not written in the book of Chronicles of the kings of Israel? So Ahab slept, and his fathers, and Ahaziah his son reigned in his place. Jehoshaphat the son of Asa began to reign over Judah the 4th year of Ahab the king. Jehoshaphat was 35 years old when he reigned, and he reigned for 25 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Abzibah, and the daughter of Shehili. He walked in all the ways of Asa his father, and he did not turn aside from it, doing what was right in the sight of the Lord. Yet the high places were not taken away, and the people still sacrificed and burned incense in the high places. And Jehoshaphat also made peace with the prince of the king, peace with the king of Israel. Okay, so we can pretty much stop there. The point, though, is that Jehoshaphat, even though he's seen as a good king, he did not do enough to purge Judah of the problems that it has. When the high places are mentioned, again, those are cultic temples to some other god. Okay, we're not talking about the high place when we talk about the church. We have a high place there too. It's not the same thing. Okay, and so he, because of the alliance that he made, and because of these other agreements and other things they did, and because he placated these people who worshiped a god other than Yahweh, he's seen as someone who is decent but weak. Okay, decent but weak. He's not evil like some of the others that we've heard mentioned, but he's still not a strong king. Okay, because he doesn't trust in the Lord. He trusts in the alliances that he forges instead of the Lord. And this is one of those keys as you continue to read in Kings and elsewhere. The key is that as you hear the stories told, if they depend solely on God, they do what is right in the sight of the Lord. If they are kind of wishy-washy like this, they do what's right, but they're still not regarded as a great king like David. Okay? And then you have those that do evil in the sight of the Lord, and those are the ones that are brokering treaties with their neighbors and entering into agreements and marriages with other people who worship a God other than our God. Okay. And so those are the three categories that you generally fall in when you're dealing with this. Now, we are at Jehoshaphat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There are still 9 generations before the deportation. Okay. And we're not going to go into depth with the rest of this. You get the sense of what's going on. Well, in terms of we went 1, 2, 3, 4. No, we did just 5. You're right.
Where'd Ahab live?
Ahab lived in Israel.
Yeah, but where? What city?
Oh, I have no idea. I don't know.
What would have been there would have been a major city up there.
Yeah.
A big one.
Yeah. Wherever Jezebel was.
Wherever Jezebel was.
Yep. But that was all fought in Israel. That wasn't in Judah. Remember, Israel's much larger at this point than Judah would be. Judah's just 2 little territories. But Israel's massive.
Battles.
Yes. And it's like every day a new battle. So, all right. Any questions or comments? Great. Well, thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Father.
My pleasure.
There.